It's not like huge.
Good. Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Right.
Good evening. I'd like to welcome you to the Manheim Central School District Board of School Directors meeting today, June 21st, 2020. Would you please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of silence? I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. And Mr. Howard, would you please do the roll call?
Mr. Clare?
Here.
Dr. Frick?
Here.
Mr. Linder?
Here.
Mr. Yosway?
Here.
Mr. McGeehan?
Here.
Mr. Need?
Here.
Mrs. Ritter? Mrs. Ritter?
She had the same problems as I did.
Mr. Bushy? Here. Mrs. Williams?
Here.
8 board members present.
Okay, and we'll continue working on this. I need to announce that we had an executive session. It was held today, June 21st, 2021, to discuss safety and personnel matters. That meeting will continue after our regular board meeting tonight. Okay, tonight's meeting is open to the public and is also being streamed virtually via live feed for fully vaccinated individuals defined as 2 weeks after an individual's final dose of the COVID-19 vaccine. Face coverings and social distancing are not required indoors or outdoors. For unvaccinated individuals, masks will be required both indoors and outdoors, consistent with the amended face covering order and PDE guidance. Okay, next, I need a motion for the approval of the June 21st, 2021 school board meeting agenda.
So moved. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Okay. Dr. Aiken?
Okay, thank you, Ms. Williams. So we are joined tonight by some special guests. And so whenever I say your name, if you would stand and remain standing, to be recognized, we do our annual end of the year awards for our teacher of the year, support staff of the year. And I guess what's neat for me is to see the colleagues nominate our folks here tonight. And then always written justification on why they chose what they chose, and to hear just the awesome things that are said about these folks here tonight is really just astounding and humbling all at once. So whenever I say your name, if you could stand and remain standing until we get through everybody, I would greatly appreciate that. So our elementary facilitator of the year, and I believe that she's just viewing online, is Marissa Lewis. Our middle school facilitator of the year is Sylvesky. Stand. Our high school facilitator of the year, Mary Noble. Our elementary support staff of the year, Amy Newton. Secondary support staff of the year, Leslie Henderson. We could give all these folks a round of applause. Right. So the next item of business is to recognize our Champion of Children Award. So this year's Champion of Children truly bleeds maroon and gray. He's a Baron and has been a Baron his entire life. This year's recipient of the award was highly instrumental in bringing Project Purple to both the middle school and the high school. He dedicates countless hours to McPhee in order to serve our students. Over the years, wherever there has been a need, whether it be a financial need or his presence as a coach, he has stepped up and met the call. Our kids have a true advocate in this year's winner. Without further delay, the 2021 Champion of Children Award winner is none other than our John Phillips. Good job, John.
Thanks, everybody. This is a huge honor, and I'm just completely humbled by this. And let's all just keep working together to make Manheim an awesome place to keep raising our kids. So thanks, everybody, and I hope you all have a great summer.
Congratulations, John.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Okay, I just want to say from the board, thank you, teachers and support staff, for all you do for our district. You know, you have gotten the recognition tonight, but as I'm sure all of you would say, there are others just as deserving as you are, as we have a great staff. So thank you very much. And Mr. Phillips, I'm proud to say I taught you in 4th grade. I'm proud to say that you are a Baron, true and true. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. I need a motion for the approval of the May 17th, 2021 school board meeting minutes.
So moved.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Okay, recognition of visitors. The board encourages citizens of the district to come before the board to present their petitions, inquiries, or other communications of interest. Please note that personal and or student discipline issues are inappropriate topics for public comment and should not be addressed to the Board of Education. Please make an appointment with the superintendent to discuss these issues. We do not have anybody signed up for public comment tonight, but we certainly welcome any public comment. So is there anybody here who would like to speak on behalf of their issues or anything like that? No speakers. We don't have any takers tonight. Okay, we're moving on to the superintendent's report. Dr. Aiken?
Thank you, Ms. Williams. Before I get started, those of you who came tonight to be recognized, stay, you're more than welcome to stay. Brian has whittled his budget presentation to 10 slides, but there's also an opportunity if you wanted to leave and celebrate, but just a little freedom if you wanted to stay or go. I just want to throw that out there.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Once again, congratulations. Have a good evening.
See you this week.
I'll be on Thursday.
Okay, so under my first item is the fair funding information, and there was a speaker who talked about this last month. Dr. Frick asked us to follow up and just provide some more details surrounding fair funding. So I'll talk briefly about this tonight. So Brian, at this point, I'll pick you.
Okay, so I am offering autographed copies of the budget presentation afterwards. Somebody asked for one, so can't imagine it. Anybody would want to leave and miss this.
We'll send them copies.
Yeah. So the speaker that came was basically advocating for the fair funding formula, the VF formula that's been developed and been in place for a couple of years. And really, I think the main part of that is they're advocating for the full piece of state money that's given out to be allocated using the formula rather than just the new money. So just to kind of go into it, when they put this formula in place, districts that were receiving a certain amount of money, it was called a hold harmless clause. They made sure no district got any less money than they got the year prior, and that's been in place ever since that. So when the state approves a new $100 million to be distributed, it's distributed using the formula. However, a base amount, which is a hold harmless amount, is always given to the districts there. That can be problematic for some people because take a district that had 2,500 students, and at the time the base rate was there, and now they have maybe a decline in enrollment, and maybe they have 1,500. So now they're still getting the same amount of funding that they received when they had 500 students versus the 1,500. And so that's where some people are upset about it. So without getting, I know I feel like it took some years to understand this formula. So without getting too deep into the weeds, I just want to kind of explain the formula a little bit and then how it impacts us if it were to go full distribution with the entire state chunk of money. I can see. So the school district's weighted student count is the first part of the formula. So basically they take a 3-year average daily membership. And that's just essentially the average number of students during the reporting period divided by the number of days in session. So it's basically the average students we had throughout the year. Then they multiply it by a number of factors. So students in acute poverty. So some economist or some whirligig somewhere figured out that it's 60% more to educate on average a student in acute poverty. So they weight that 0.6. Then they add students in poverty, and there's different levels of poverty that they have. The mild poverty costs 30% more, so that's a 30% weight. Then English language learners, dual language learners that require language instruction, they have a weight of 0.6. There's a 0.2 weight for the number of learners we have in outside charter schools. And then finally, for this part of the formula, there's a sparsity size adjustment. And basically that is, think of a school district that maybe has 500 students, but has 90 square miles of land that it's covering. So what that means is it's very sparse. Transportation cost is higher. There's no, with 3,000 students, you can do things and get economies of scale there. You can't get that with a district that's large like ours that only maybe had 500 students. So there's a 0.7 per ADM adjustment on that. So when you get to the end of it, that would take your average daily membership and it could expand it to, if you start with 3,200, it could expand it to 4,000 would be your number weighted. The next part is school district factors. And so the adjustment factors are the median household income index and then a local effort index. And very simply, the median household income is calculated by taking our average or our median household income divided by the state median income. And that creates a multiplier. And then the local effort index is really designed, it says there, to determine whether a district is making a fair local tax effort. So what that basically means is it compares the tax burden in our district to the tax burden statewide. So, and again, if anybody wants to get deeper in the weeds on this, I'd be glad to sit down with the numbers, but I'm trying to keep it at least a little light here. And then the local capacity index is how much spending per weighted student could a district afford if it taxed at the statewide median effort? Because there are some districts that can't get to the median statewide district effort. So then they come up with a total weighted and adjusted student count, which is the school district's weighted student count multiplied by the school district's adjustment factors. And then finally, they calculate the school district's share of funding, which is the district's total weighted and adjusted student count divided by the sum of all the school districts in the state of their total weighted and adjusted student count. So that creates a kind of a proportion of the total chunk of dollars that Manheim Central could get. And I just kind of ran it with 1920 and 2021. 2021 was kind of a throwaway year with the pandemic, and the calculation is a mess this year. So what I did was I took the current Manheim Central share and just compared it as if we were getting 100 million extra dollars from the state, which is a lot of times what they settle on. And so basically you can see here that in 1920, when our formula was run, compared to the rest of the state, we had 0.1088%. So that would be like 0.0011. And then when you looked at the new numbers for the 21-22 year, actually, it's 0.1205%. So what I did was go down there and say the Manheim Central share, if all was distributed by the formula, and for 1920, it would have been 6,802,510. For 2021, with 100 million, bless you, it would have been 7.657 million. And then below is what we would get with the hold harmless. So that's with the base amount that we're given, and then all the new money distributed by the formula. And you can see in 1920, we would have actually been harmed by the entire state revenue subsidy being distributed by the formula. Whereas in this year, with an additional 100 million in the pot, with our new share compared to the rest of the state, we would actually benefit 286,000. So basically, it can change year to year, and it's not just dependent on what's happening with Manheim Central's numbers. It's dependent on what's happening with every other district in the state. So if another district all of a sudden gets a lot of increase in English language learners, or their free and reduced lunch amount goes up and they have more students in poverty, that will throw everybody's share of the total pot. It'll move it around, and you can see that's a pretty big difference when you take 515 school districts that moved it from it being almost a $500,000 loss for us to a $286,000 gain. So really, I think the heart of that resolution is they want the dollars to be fairly distributed using the formula. They don't want the hold harmless. They want the entire pot of dollars distributed using the formula. So any questions with that? This is probably one of the more complex things we deal with.
Thank you for presenting this. I appreciate the complexity of it, but I think there are two things that would affect our district that might be incidental, but I think are important. Tell me if I'm correct. One is that the control of our taxpayers' money would move away from the 9 board members in the community towards the state, towards this formula. And the other is, you had mentioned an adjustment factor around mean income. I think that was, it might not be the exact word, but if we as a district have done a good job of keeping taxes low and providing good education, but the expectation is that we tax at a higher rate, because in order to meet that mean contribution, then we would be expected to raise our taxes, or to raise that level of taxes from our community. In other words, it would be, if we were taxing less than the average, that would almost be punitive to us.
Yeah, so you're right on the two things there. The one thing that I would tend to disagree with is, because this is already controlled by the state, I don't think the local school board would actually lose any more control over this, because they're already starting to slowly implement the formula. This is all state money. It wouldn't impact local. But you are correct that districts that have a higher ability to get local revenue would be expected to tax higher and would get less state funding as a result of that. So
Manheim falls into that, doesn't it?
we do. And we have all of Lancaster County, really a lot of it, with the exception of a few districts, have high local effort.
And I guess regarding the first thing, okay, so we're moving towards it slowly, which to me is preferable than the jump to it where we lose control. I'd rather move slowly towards something bad than quickly.
Yeah, I mean, and again, it depends where our pro rata, where our share falls in, whether it would benefit us, or one year it could benefit us, the next year it could harm us. So. And they do use a 3-year.
The district wanted to do something with, they wanted to build an auditorium for community use or something like that. We would have less ability to raise the funds to do that. We have to go through this formula.
No, because we would still have our local taxing ability. Yeah. So Where that would come into play is if they move towards a property tax elimination
Okay,
and they pushed all of that money towards Harrisburg, then local school boards would lose a lot of taxing authority to Harrisburg, and Harrisburg would decide. And if you talk to most business managers and or SBA or something like that, Harrisburg usually can't be trusted with the distribution of funds. I'll deny that if somebody says I said it, but
I think he's recording this, Brian.
yeah, okay, well, I'm in trouble then.
Any other questions for Mr. Howard on the fair funding?
Thank you.
All right, any questions, just follow up.
Okay, item B, we have Lauren here tonight. And Lauren, I'm gonna ask you if you would come up front here. As kind of a segue to Brian's budget presentation, we thought it would be timely to talk about where we are from a debt structure standpoint, so.
Thank you, Dr. Aiken, and good evening, everyone. Nice to see you all in person this evening. Given some conversations we've had with your administration over the last several weeks, we thought it would be prudent, as you are in the height of budget season, to talk about where we stand with the high school financings. As you may recall, we got the first piece of the money for the high school back in the fall, and we issued at really all-time low rates. So chopping away about $10 million of the total financing was really smart planning at that point in time. But let me just give you a little bit of an update on where we stand, timing, and then some recommendations that we would like to make, given that you don't have a voting share in your decision-making. And I can say things a lot easier when I don't have the taxpayers calling me up too. So if we can turn, did I get a clicker?
There to your right,
Thank you. Am I pointing towards you, Brian?
now you should be good.
Yeah, great. I just wanted to give you an update on the debt of the district as it currently stands before we talk about adding any additional funding in for the high school. So last time I was in front of you was probably back in the fall, and we were just gearing up to do a number of debt refinancings as well as securing the first piece of the high school financing monies. And so you can see there in columns 5, 6, and 7, the three most recent issues that we've done. Column 5 was the $10 million that we secured for the high school. And you can see, do I have a? If you look to footnote number 5, you see that the yield on that $10 million we got for the high school is 1.58%. Really incredible money, incredible rate on a debt structure that's really weighted towards the end. I mean, this thing has a very long average life. So the fact that we secured that below 1.6% is pretty remarkable. And really that was just a matter of market timing. Wish I could take credit for that. But columns 6 and 7 were two debt refinancings that we did. And I went back and looked just for your edification. The series of 2021, column number 6, was a refinancing that we saved about $1.6 million over the life of the issue that we refinanced. And on column number 7, the series A of 2021, we saved an additional $1.2 million. So while we were out, borrowing for new projects as well, we were able to capitalize on the fact that interest rates had dropped so much and refinance some of your older debt. So we've kind of exhausted all of those opportunities right now. The next one that may come up is that column number 3, the 2018 bonds. Those are callable in 2023. So we'll continue to monitor that as we get closer to that time. But for now, probably no real other debt refinancings to do, but now we're really in the heat of talking about the high school project. This is the net debt. So the last page was all the principal and interest payments that you make. This nets out the plan con subsidy. So as a result of going through the plan con process, the state does chip in a little bit of money on some of your projects. And so this is really your true cost of funds, if you will. And you can see that you're basically on the far right column there, level at about $5.6, $5.7 million for the next 12 years. And then the debt starts to drop off, which is important to note that beginning that those drops off in debt service allows us to build in the financing the additional financing for the high school with a minimizing the millage impact. So we've taken advantage of the fact that this district has never borrowed frivolously. Your debt is relatively short in duration. And so we're able to borrow when we need for major projects without handcuffing the taxpayers and handcuffing the district with 30 or 40-year debt. Talking a little bit about interest rates. If you recall, I said we did that first piece of the high school back in November of 2020. So all-time ever lows in the municipal market actually happened in August. So we were really close. Markets were off just maybe 10 basis points or so, or 1% between those two dates. But really incredible timing. Like I said, that we got on that first piece. We did see kind of a spike up in rates back in the earlier part of this year, but we've seen rates kind of normalize back down again. There are fears of inflation, as you see basically everywhere you go to buy anything right now. So those do have some upward pressures on interest rates, but we're seeing rates continue to hold in there, which is why we've been talking to the administration and wanted to recommend this evening pursuing potentially getting a larger chunk of money next for the high school than we were initially intending. I think last time I was in front of you, we were talking about getting $20 million next for the high school. Now we're saying, let's go ahead and get 35. We know we're going to spend it. And let's take advantage of the fact that rates are really low while we have some unfortunate things going on the other side of the business with bids higher, cost of inputs higher, labor shortages, labor higher, all of those things. So great time to be borrowing still. And that'll move us into the discussion related to how much we're going to be borrowing when, and recommendations related to millage increases, et cetera. We've run tonight two separate scenarios, 60 million and 65 million for the high school. This column here is already done, this first purple column. That's the 10 million that we secured last year. As I mentioned, these are the next two proposed issues that we're talking about. We want to secure $35 million next, given the fact that we are seeing extremely low interest rates right now. We made some assumptions. We do have a little bit of interest rate contingency built in there, about 0.5 percentage point. But we're moving through the process right now, actually, of getting a rating and going through all of the legal documents and official statement preparation. So we may be in a place to get that secured soon. So hopefully that contingency will disappear and we'll be able to show even better study than this. But assuming that you need the full $60 million to finance the high school, we would get the 35 this year. That would leave us about 15 million yet to finance, doing that in 2022. And the reason that we wouldn't recommend doing everything now is, one, probably don't know what that number is exactly yet. And two, we don't want to underfinance or overfinance. So let's say we thought we needed 60 million. So we did 35 plus 15 is 50 million right now, but you needed 61 or 62. Well, it doesn't make a lot of sense to go out and do a 1 million or a $2 million bond issue to cover that difference. On the flip of the coin, in a perfect world, let's say the bids came in low and you had some cost savings and you only needed 8, but you borrowed 60. You don't want to over borrow in that case either. So that's why we like to split the issues up to allow us to kind of borrow exactly the amount that you need to complete the project. And we're hedging ourselves and saying, let's get the majority of the bond issues done now so that we know that we're getting a really great interest rate, and we'll leave ourselves whatever the remainder is to do in 2022. In order to fund $60 million of projects, this is a hypothetical millage phase in for the next several years. Now, in 2020, you did sock away about 0.14 mils for the project. I believe in the budget for this year, we socked away another 0.13. So those first 2 years of this purple column are covered. But in this illustration, we still need to come up with a few more mils to get us fully funded to the amount that we're projecting we're going to need of 0.66. our average or our annual run rate for debt service, when all is said and done, is going to be about 7.6 million. Now, that's assuming that, you know, the contingencies and everything that we have in here stay true, but we like to build these studies knowing that hopefully we have some wiggle room and hopefully we come in better, but you never know when you have another pandemic or something else that causes interest rates to go the right way. So that's what $60 million looks like. How you come up and when you come up with these additional mills that you need is not set in stone. This is purely an illustration. And if you said, you know what, we have all of it that we can put in place now and be done with it and put it to bed, that's great too. But just as a reference point, I did go back and look at the Act 34 study that we did for the high school project back in, is that fall of 19 probably. That was a $40 million run that we did. And interestingly, because rates were a good bit higher at that point in time, this total net debt column that we needed to get to was just over $8 million. And the total millage requirement was 0.86 mils. Now, we did have some contingency built into that study as well, but it's pretty incredible that the drop in interest rates that we've seen has made debt much more affordable, such that even though the project is more and more expensive, the impact to the budget is actually less. So pretty incredible. And you know, I know we all wish that prices weren't doing what they were doing right now, but I guess if there's one silver lining, that it's driving interest rates down. So this is what $60 million looks like. Let me just flip real quick to the $65 million option. It's the same study. This column is the same. We're still getting the $35 million here in the next few months, but then the next series needs to be in 2022, 20 million instead of 15. We now need to get to about a $7.8 million run rate for debt service every year. And the total mills needed are just shy of 3/4 of a mil. So a number of things to think about and what we're working through right now as we gear up to actually finance this next piece of the high school is, number one, we're about to undergo the credit rating process, and Manheim Central has a really excellent credit rating. AA- puts you in probably the top 25 to 35% of all districts in the Commonwealth. Credit ratings are extremely important when you are issuing debt, because investors of your bonds look to the credit rating to make their investing decisions. The higher the credit rating, the lower the interest rate an investor is willing to accept, because you have that much higher likelihood of repaying your debts. Now, between all of us, we know that the state, if a school district defaults on a debt payment, the state steps in and makes that payment. So the actual likelihood of a default on a Pennsylvania school district bond is next to zero. However, an investor still wants a solid credit rating. So when we're in the middle of the credit rating process, it's very important that we tell a good story, because if any increase or decrease in your credit rating makes your debt incrementally more or less expensive, because as you go up and down that credit rating scale, you need to pay up or pay down to the investor. So it's very important that we tell a good story right now. You have very good stories to tell. The growth of the district has been phenomenal, and that really has allowed you to build out your buildings. Doe Run, Barron, all of those projects were done really, a lot of it due to the growth of the district and not really on the backs of the taxpayers. You have one of the lowest taxing millage rates in the county. So your growth is phenomenal, and they love to see that. Standard & Poor's loves to see that. The other thing that they look at, however, is cash and cash position and cash projections. And so we're all from Lancaster County. We don't like to tax. We don't like debt, but showing good faith that you intend to keep your cash position where it is or improve it is always a credit positive. And so showing, that a millage increase is something that helps your credit rating for sure. Not to say that it's going to lead to a credit upgrade or a downgrade should you go one way or the other. But showing those projections is very important in Standard & Poor's rating discussions and rating outcomes. With this also being sort of the last major borrowing piece that you have to do at this point, once we get through the high school, we should be in a fairly good position, capital project wise, getting us to a place where we know we're funded for the project with all of the other unknowns that you have in your budget, from salaries to all of the inflationary pressures that you're seeing on your budget elsewhere. And the other caveat being, sort of have this one-time COVID index that is artificially high. It's expected to be this high at this point in time. But knowing that that will likely start to dip back down in the next couple of years, it may make sense, and I know it's a difficult decision to make, and it's easier for me to say it here than it is for you all, but to make hay while you can and fund these ongoing expenses with ongoing revenues. I know you've had some unexpected windfalls that have come your way from sales of buildings, et cetera, back taxes paid, but those are one-time revenues. With obviously debt service being an annual large portion of your budget, funding that with ongoing revenues is something that we view as extremely important. I know we know most of our business managers across the county often pull rabbits out of hats, but this debt's going to be in place for a long time. We don't know what indexes are going to look like 2, 3, 4 years from now. So all of that to be said, our recommendation would be index. For other folks in the past, we've recommended index plus all exceptions, knowing that that's a very hard pill to swallow. And again, it's easier for me to say it than anyone up here, but getting those mills in place for folks have been invaluable, so that in future years, when they are fully built out in a situation like will be soon, you hopefully get to a point where you can enjoy zero for some years. So let me pause there and answer any questions you may have.
2 parts.
Yes.
Do you know what the 30-day average is based on our credit rating right now as it is, and what the 6-month future is?
Average interest rate.
Yeah.
Yeah. If we were to go out and secure this right now, we would probably be in the low 2% range.
6-month future would be then right now, what they're projecting?
We are expected to have some upward motion in interest rates in the next year. 6 months is a little less clear. It's really going to depend on what the Fed says, and they're very measured always in their discussions. But they have acknowledged that inflation is a major concern. They haven't admitted that it's a major concern yet. They've said that they've started talking about inflation. So they like to tap dance around everything. But inflation in and of itself creates a rising interest rate environment. So, I mean, I'm sure all of you are seeing the same things I am at the grocery store and everywhere else you go. Prices of most goods and services are going up, which historically leads to higher interest rates as well.
2 questions.
Yes.
First, I've been on the board for 10 years and we've only ever gone up to the index. We've had 2 years with no tax increase, and most years were below index. And 9 out of those 10 years, we have always had a surplus. And we didn't have a surplus was because we bought $1 million piece of property. Still would have had a surplus. So do your investors look at that? And secondly, we have a hoard of taxpayer cash in our fund that we can commit to debt service. $8, $9, $10 million a year, investors look at that as a good sign as well. Because I'll be honest with you, I don't want to pound our taxpayers with full tax increases if we can use some of the money we already have. And our historical finances have shown surpluses.
I will say that they do look at history, but more important to your question on using, existing fund balance for debt service is that showing that you plan to do that is a credit negative, because cash balances, rainy day funds are important to the investing public.
We are at our maximum allowable unfunded balance or uncommitted balance. We have loads of cash that we can commit to paying down our debt. Or we can just use it and cut down on the borrowing.
And that is an option as well, using some number to reduce. And I would recommend, if you had some cash that you wanted to use for the projects, to do it on the final borrowing. Because, borrowing or locking up an interest rate now on $35 million would be, in our view, prudent because of the low nature of interest rates. But knowing that there's one more slug of financing that you would need to say, hey, yeah, let's throw whatever that number is, whatever the board and the administration are comfortable with, using that money to reduce the size of the final borrowing is a strategy we see used often. But not knowing exactly what that number is, to commit it to paying debt service won't be sustainable over the long term. Because at this point, we're looking at.
Help alleviate tax increases. We would amortize, let's say we had $8 million committed to we amortize that over 10 years. That would help us alleviate tax increases for taxpayers.
Yes, it would. To use the cash for that.
Your investors don't look at it that way.
They don't.
They'd rather have us taxed to the max.
Not necessarily to the max, but showing declining fund balances raises questions on districts' willingness to tax to fund operations.
We're not funding operations, we're paying debt service. That's not an operational expense.
But eventually, if you get to a point where you totally spent down fund balance, now you
We would only spend down the committed fund balance to debt service. We still have other fund balances available.
Okay, sure. Yeah, that is an option, but they still look at all funds, and we can try to educate them to the best of our ability on the practices of Manheim Central, but it is considered a credit negative when you show declining balances, and they look at everything in one bucket, and then you kind of spread out the view, and then they look at the individual funds as well. So if that is a general downward trend, it's viewed as a negative.
Brian, your perspective on that option?
That's an option. However, with the Act 1 index, so the state limits how much money we can raise each year. So while we're using our fund balance to pay that down, that is index we're foregoing. And yes, we're not taxing our taxpayers, but slow and steady is winning the race for us because it's been successful for us. However, so if we go 5-6 years and we use a couple million each year and we pay that down to zero, now that tax is not in place. Now we have a recurring expense up here, and because we've used fund balance, we don't have a recurring income in place to meet that recurring expense. And now we've got a big problem for our taxpayers.
Are we going to use that fund balance ever? Because in the 10 years I've been on the board, we had a committed balance for Peasers, and we kept using tax increases to pay Peasers, and we never used 1 penny of that fund balance to pay Peasers. All we did was keep hoarding cash from surpluses.
And I would say, though, that the method we took, knowing we were going to have $100 million plus of construction projects, has actually benefited our taxpayers, us being maybe the fourth or fifth lowest taxing district in the county. So I think that the strategy worked. I think that we will begin, I will show that we will begin to need our fund balance to, while we're getting in place to meet that recurring expense, we will need to use some fund balance to get to that place while we're increasing our recurring revenue. So that will happen. And yes, like this year, as I'll show, we had probably $800,000 of some buildings that are going to sell or are going to be leased that we got delinquent taxes that we had no idea we'd be getting, and transfer taxes on some large sales of property. That's not a recurring revenue stream. That's a one-time revenue flow. I don't know that I'm willing to gamble as we get into a place where, now what Lauren showed was net debt. So that was 7.5 million. But what I show on my budget analysis is the gross debt, because I'm already showing the planned con revenue. So the gross debt goes up, what, over 8 million, as you'll see on my analysis. So showing that gross debt, that is almost a $1.5 million jump in 1 year. So we will need fund balance to bridge that gap, and it will begin to decline. I'll show on my 5-year projection how it does begin to decline. But my fear for the taxpayers is that we burn through fund balance. We get to a point where we're down to 10 to 15% fund balance. And now we've got a revenue gap of $2-3 million that we can't make up. That's my real concern. And understanding, we've gone 0 2 times in the last 4 years. I'm a taxpayer too, so I don't like to pay any additional tax for sure. But I also don't want to be caught in a position where expenses are here and revenues here, and there's no way on earth, if we're 5, 6, 7% apart, that we can raise that revenue in 1 year, which means we're going to start having some program issues. That's my biggest concern with that. I think some kind of a hybrid work might be there, but I also think there's a lot of uncertainties that maybe we want to put millage in place now. So that, last year was a huge uncertainty, and we're heading into some time. So I hear what you're saying, because, I hate to get upset. It's like, oh, here comes 800,000. Oh man,
I'm not talking about one-time income.
Right.
I'm talking about $8 million we have hoarded for 10 years, and we need to use it. We can't keep hoarding taxpayers' money.
And we will be using it. But if you talk about on the 5-year projection, I show you how many months of operating costs that our rainy day fund or our fund balance covers, and it's not as much as you think when you start to look at it. So I would just caution about running that too low. Kind of like if you need to use your savings account to pay for your electric bill, and then all of a sudden your savings runs out, but now you have your electric bill. So I hear you, and we've built up a fund balance. And I think you'll start to see that decline, as you would say Hempfield or another school district that's on the other side of their building projects. Their fund balances have declined as a result of being on the other side and having to service the debt and to pay the operation. So I always take an extra 800,000 of unexpected back taxes. Would never discourage that, but I also can't bet on that year over year in my budget. I can't budget that way. I have to budget more conservatively.
Brian kind of gets into his budget presentation. Is there any other questions for Lauren?
Did I understand correctly that the difference between the base borrowing and the extra 20 million was 200,000 a year?
Yep, round numbers.
That total next debt, it's 7.6 versus 7.8. So for another 200,000 a year in our budget, we can borrow the 20 million at today's rates. That's a fair way to look at it.
Yes.
Twice? Lauren, thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Lauren.
Thanks, Laura. Good evening.
We will segue now to Brian's presentations.
I'm using Zoom here, sorry. Okay, so this might be one of the most exciting budgets we've had in a while. So updating the projection for this current year, and we're projected to come in around $2 million over for a multitude of reasons. The first one is local revenue did not suffer as much as the tax bureaus and the state organizations feared. If you recall, they came out with some projections and some numbers that said we were going to really tank on the local revenue side, and that did not happen, or at least it was delayed. So we did come in. Earned income tax was one of the biggest things we were fearing, and that's going to come in close to budget, the previous budget. So we had marked it down. So we're going to end up coming in probably about $1 million on earned income taxes. And so they based those numbers off of the previous recessionary period. What they found out is this recession with the pandemic is behaving slightly different than the recovery of the last recession that they clocked it against. The second thing is, and it's more close to 850 or 900. We received over $750,000 of unexpected one-time money from delinquent real estate taxes and transfer taxes. So transfer taxes are when properties are sold, we get a percentage of transfer tax on that sale. There are some large warehouses, some large properties that are selling or being leased to new tenants that they're clearing up their delinquent taxes. So that's certainly been a benefit to us in this current operational year. So this is something that Kelly Martin, our assistant business manager, and we maintain. We have a software system that we maintain this. We upload each month's results and we generate new projections and make adjustments each month. So it's something that we may begin to show monthly or even quarterly to the board in the board reports. Fund balance analysis, and this is just the actual kind of picture of where we're at or where we're going with a proposed with the fund balance. As Mr. McGeehan said, we do have there's a couple other districts. We are probably one of the more comfortable from a fund balance standpoint, which is a fact that Mr. McGeehan just brought up. So you can see there, putting the $2 million projection in for 2021 and what that puts us at down below. A better look at this is going to come later in the presentation, where I look at the 5-year projection, where we take a closer look at the usage of fund balance and the percentage of fund balance as it pertains to our expenses. The proposed budget we're sitting at, and I'm going to show the changes from the last budget. We had moved from a surplus, but piggybacking on Lauren's presentation with increasing the bond issue, that's going to increase the debt service payment. And there were some other expenditures that we had to put in there, some tied to using some federal funds for. The other were inflationary measures that we put in place, which I'll talk about a little bit later. So where we sit right now at a 3% base index tax increase, we're budgeting a $235,000 deficit. However, admittedly, school district budgeting, you have to be conservative. So from certain things with benefits or whatever, you don't go worst case scenario, but you have to go at least what the health insurance companies are projecting could be your average claims. If we do better than the average claims, that's certainly a good thing. Here's a look at the proposed budget with a 3%, a 2%, and a 1.5% increase. And you can see it's really just the difference of the local real estate taxes that are driving the change in the deficit. So it ranges from a $235,000 deficit to a $745,000 deficit at 1.5. Budget changes since last budget. You can see this is just an analysis of where we're at. We got some final numbers in from the CTC. Some salaries and benefits increased a little bit as we're looking toward the market driving some hourly wages. Final insurance figures came in. Debt service changes based on Lauren's presentation. Food service transfer. We didn't have to last year, but we're going to have to probably subsidize the food service operation this year. We usually do each year. We didn't have to this year because of the way things worked out. But we're looking forward and thinking that we're going to have to subsidize some of the food service operations. One of the things that this school board has done has opted for a higher quality meal for our learners, based on trying to constantly cut a profit in the food service, which
You usually report if we had a loss, for non-paid, usually around 10,000.
yeah, and that is actually like wiped out now because lunches will remain free through the end of next year. So although there's some things, and Sarah's not here to share that, but we had a lot going on tonight. So Sarah's going to come in July and present her food service presentation and then talk about lunch prices for next year, which are going to be free. So it's an easy conversation. Miscellaneous operations, just tweaks to budgets and site budget changes and discussions with principals, with some tweaks here and there. So nothing major on those. I always like to show this because it gives the board an idea of tax decision they make and how it affects individual homeowners. And so the median homestead value is 195.8, and you can see there at a 3% tax increase, that would be an $86 increase annually for the median homestead value. At 2%, it's a $57. This is the, you should be used to this sheet right here. It's the annual real estate tax calculation. And you can see the growth in assessment and also the millage change there. Each 1% equals about $339, almost $340,000. 1% increase is 0.1466 mils. So when you look at the analysis Lauren just did and talking about getting 0.66 for mills in place, a 1% increase gets us 0.1466. But then keep in mind that other operational costs increase as well year over year. The value of a mill, a little slightly different than what she used because she used a beginning mill value, but at a 15.1011, the value of a mill would be 2.266 for us. And it's about $7,000 higher than what she had used, but that would have been the previous millage value. Growth in assessed value by municipality. And then the average, you can see the average was 1.14% growth. Back in the previous 10 years, we've hit as high as 2%, maybe a little over 2% growth. You can see we had a dip there, which came back, and now it's kind of leveled out. Ratho Township had a pretty decent year at 1.67. And talking to some of the planners and some of the communities, Penn Township could be a growth area. Ratho is starting to get built out, although there's some warehouse and some commercial activity there. That's helpful as well. Here's the Manheim Central tax history versus the Act 1 index. The keystone is the maximum allowable tax increase. The little MC is what the board actually did increase. And if you go back to 15, 16, we've been under index 3 times. Twice we've been at 0. During that time, there'd been a 9.7 million increase in expenses. We constructed this district office we're sitting in. We constructed Doe Run Elementary, and we constructed Barron Elementary, and we're entering the high school renovation right now. So I just wanted to point out the things that we've accomplished while maintaining an index. If you look at some other districts, they've gone up and above. Some districts have taxed above, with exceptions, 5-6% each year to do their construction projects. we've been able to keep with responsible use of growth. We've been able to stay at or under index during that time. This is a 5-year aggregate millage percentage, increase 16-17 through 2021. I took the rest of the district's names off. We tend to do that. But you can see there we are at 7.1% during that time, which is the 5th lowest taxation of the county school districts. And there's a lot that goes into this as well. Some districts don't have some of the growth that we had. So so just saying we have the lowest millage increase doesn't mean we've done something magic or different. It just means that we may have had a 2% growth in our assessed value. Some other districts might have had a less than 1%. And there is a bit of financial management that the board puts into it as well that helps. Expenses by function, and there's 2 ways we track expenses. One is the function, so it's the department that's doing it. It's whether it's regular education, vocational ed, the business department, the administrative services, board services. So that's what the function is. And then the expenses by object are the type of expenditure. And school budgeting and school accounting is kind of backwards from like a corporation. When I was in a corporation, we started with the type of expenditure first, and then who spent it. Here we talk about who spent it or what function spent it, and then what they spent it on. So here's really what I want to get into the meat of this. So we can look at 1 year over 1 year, but really looking out 3 to 5 years is really what you have to do to make sure that our recurring revenue continues to meet the recurring expenditure needs. And so if you look out here, this is the revenue projected, and I've assumed index as the base when I put these numbers in, just for reference. And we've been provided with a forecast for index. We have a couple years of plus 3% indexes, and then they're supposed to drop back into the low 2s after that time. We do not get an adjustment to our base index. So with the base index, some districts will get an adjustment, which will allow them to have index plus a small adjustment. Believe it or not, Warwick gets an adjustment. We don't here in Manheim Central. So we get our whatever the base index is published by the state. That's what our maximum tax is. So this year we've got the 21-22, we're proposing 59.643 million of revenue. That goes all the way up to 64,944, 537, and 24,25. Now, admittedly, there's some assumptions that are made here. We use the contract that we have with the association, and that's the percentage that we increase salaries by each year. That isn't necessarily, sometimes if we eliminate positions, or if we have maybe a long-time tenured employee retire and then we replace that at a lower rate, sometimes we save some money attritionally there. We always look to do that. Last year, if you look at the salary growth from 1920 to 2021, you'll remember we dug in pretty hard and eliminated. We didn't replace some positions, and we restructured some things so that we could be better off financially and be prepared, knowing that we're going into another building project. So you can see that if you look at the salaries here, 21.68 to 21.492 of the projection. But then they're increased by, same thing with healthcare. We assume a standard increase. There's some industry stuff that I look up to find out what those numbers are. We also look at projected cost of living increases when we look at these expenses. But you can see here, and just kind of pointing out, so when Lauren was talking about net debt, what she was saying is we receive reimbursement from the state for the middle school project, the Doe Run project, and the Barron project. There is no plan con on the high school project. That was in a moratorium at the time we went into our project, so there will be no reimbursement for the high school project. And so in my budget figures and the expenses, I have to deal with the gross debt. So because the plan con revenue is already shown in revenues, so I can't show the net debt in my expenditures. So if you look here, I want to go 21-22 to 22-23. You can see the drop there of $6.5 million of debt service to over $8 million, which is $1.5 million. So if we had a $2 million surplus this year, and we're going to have an increase in debt service of $1.5 million, and then there's also going to be salary increases contractually that we're obligated to do, and benefits will go up, then you can see that $2 million quickly gets eaten up by that $1.5 million debt service payment. Down below, you can see the use of district reserves to balance budgets. So if you start to go out to 22, 23, 23, 24, and finally 24, you start to see an increasing deficit. Now, I'm not going to swear by that number in 24, 25 because a lot could happen between now and then that I can't guarantee, and I'm making assumptions. But if you look down below, you can see we start to work through our fund balance. So there's first, we're going to take out the amount that's committed for PSER stabilization, and then I move into using debt service. We can discuss that as a board as we talk about fund balance and how we want to kind of use that and to offset debt, and whether we do indeed take the last bond issue and say, hey, we're going to take $5 million of fund balance and we're going to offset the debt we're going to issue. And I think a lot of that's going to be based on what the rates are. If the rates are still low, it would probably be beneficial to issue the debt versus if the rates tend to, climb, maybe then would be a good time to use some cash reserves to offset some of the debt increase because the rate would be increasing. We could keep the low rate debt and clip off some of the high rate debt. So, but I'd like to have that option in a couple of years to decide whether that's what we're going to do. And so you can see there that that deficit would be covered by fund balance during the time. That's what I was kind of talking about, Mr. McGeehan. And of course, if we have a miracle million, I don't know if that's going to happen or not. Some kind of revenue source or whatever. So this is kind of a fund balance remaining, you can see. And I want to kind of point you down to the percentage of fund balance, months coverage of operating costs down here. So the way Kelly Martin and I started looking at this is we started kind of looking at the months of coverage of our operating costs that our fund balance covers. And so when doing that, I look at next year's expenses. So the projected expenditures from next year would be what's being covered by 1920's fund balance. You can see there we start off, we're at a percentage of fund balance, which is a percentage that our fund balance is of our expenditures, 37.1%. That's 4.45 months coverage. And then out to 24-25, I show us reducing to 24.33% and 2.92 months of coverage of our operating expenditures. There's other funds that are available. Because we sold HCB to the IU, we got that one-time cash flow. We're not funding our capital reserve right now. So that would be decreasing a little bit. We'll have to eventually pick that back up though, as we have anywhere from $300,000 to $600,000 of capital projects each year. Now that our new facilities directors in place, so we're going to be sitting down and re-upping our 5-year capital spending plan. So eventually we'll have to pick back up with funding that capital reserve fund. And then the healthcare stabilization fund. So the way we do that is, if you'll recall, is we use as an internal service fund. So we pay premiums to our internal service fund. The internal service fund pays the actual premiums and the monthly cost. And then the reason we do that is so if we would have a bad budget year, to say a couple $100,000 over budget, the internal service fund absorbs that amount rather than our general fund being badly off and getting caught kind of by surprise. So that I have that staying stable. But if we go over budget 400,000 because we have some, health claims that we didn't expect because we're self-funded, that might go down to $1 million, and it could go up to 1.5, and it could go down to 900,000. So that's kind of there for stabilization in the general fund, so that we don't have those wild swings in healthcare costs. And then down below, I just have debt as a percentage of total expenditures. You can see there, we've been clocking around 10.5 to 11%. We're going to jump up to 12.6 into the 12 ranges with our debt service. And so that's one of the reasons we want to have that millage in place, that revenue in place. That's just a 5-year forecast summary of the items I just showed. And you can see there, if you just follow these numbers from 235,000 out to 2.7 million of projected forecasted deficit. I ran it with a 1.5%, and those numbers changed from 745,000 deficit to 3.24 million there. So I just wanted to run that forecast with, this is a model that we can plug some different numbers into. We can change assumptions, and we can reforecast the numbers to see what it looks like. That's just for those who are visually inclined, that's just a difference in 3% versus 1.5%. I wanted to point out the real estate tax increase and impact on our budget over the last couple of years. On 2021, you can see that with the 0%, we generate an additional real estate tax generated of $344,615. The operational costs were down last year, primarily because we weren't operating a full bore for some time. So the total change in operation spending was a decrease of $983,000, a debt service increase of $80,000. So a total change in expenditures of $903,000. And it was a positive, it says shortfall, but that was actually, we were okay with our real estate taxes there. If you look at 21-22 on the forecast, we look to get just under $1.5 million of real estate taxes, but the total change in our operation spending is $3.447 million, and the debt service increase is $400,000 increase. So you can see the total change in expenses is 3.846, and we're only generating 1.48 of real estate taxes at 3%, which aren't even covering the budgeted labor and benefits increase. Moving forward to 22-23, I just ran the same calculation with the index that they're projecting, which is what they're projecting, but wages over the next couple of years are going to determine what that base index is. So when we do an annual millage increase, we need to not only be concerned about the increase in debt service, we need to make sure we're covering the increases for operations as well, whether it's labor and benefits that we're contractually obligated to, or other expenditures like maintenance, or food service operations and those types of things. So budget areas of concern, I don't know that it keeps me up at night, but things that concern me with the budget moving forward. Last year, 0% due to the pandemic. I've shown, I don't have it in this slide, but I've shown how, because of the limitations of Act 1 and the fact that, like a business, you could maybe might not be the best business decision, but you could get a 10% increase in your product in 1 year if you found out you were, losing your shirt. With the school district, you can't get back that revenue. There's no way to do it with the Act 1 index. So that has a compounding effect year over year. So kind of like if you made $10,000 and you got a 5% raise, that would increase your base and it would compound year over year. Future Act 1 indexes are uncertain and they're driven by wage growth. So depending on how the economy recovers, that's going to drive what the Act 1 index is. So as Lauren, I think, pointed out, there's indication that they could dip. Right now, they're projected to stay stable for 2 to 3 years and then drop off sharply. This was just something interesting, but it was concerning. I haven't really been able to make heads or tails of it just yet and how it's going to shake out. But in talking with the Lancaster County Tax Collection Bureau, they reported, they put out a report on quarterly year over year. And it was kind of interesting, the unique taxpayer Social Security numbers that reported, the wages per those unique Social Security numbers are up 3.81%, but the employment has decreased by 6.54%. So fewer people made more money, but there were 20,268 less people that reported wages in the first quarter of 2021. I'm not quite sure what to make of that now. But it doesn't look good because the quarter over quarter was about a $1.4 million difference in taxes collected by and to the negative by the Lancaster County Tax Collection Bureau. There was a huge fourth quarter and it looked like it might look pretty good, but then the first quarter is dropping off. We won't know more until the second, third quarter goes out. But that's something we're keeping an eye out. I'll be working with LCTCB to try to get some more Manheim Central specific data that maybe we can crank this as county-wide district, but we'll see if we can get some Manheim Central data to see how it's impacting us locally. Inflation. I would see the biggest impact being maintenance, food service, and fuel prices. So fuel prices have gone up. If anyone's tried to buy a piece of plywood lately, it's up huge. Our maintenance department, they're always doing small projects where they're getting plywood or plexiglass or other kind of building materials. That could increase their cost. Food service, I know our grocery bill's gone up. It doesn't seem like we're buying much more. But that could be a problem for our food service, which is why we put a subsidy in there this year again. Fuel prices for transportation and for school buses. Market pressure on hourly support wages. And I just note here that this could likely drive up the recurring cost of our operations and support labor. We have advertised for positions for support staff, for food service workers, for custodial workers, and we've gotten goose eggs on a lot of them. I mean, we are just not getting applicants. There are other places out there giving bonuses. They're up to $17, $18, $19 an hour. I can't help but think that this is going to, at least in the short term or even permanently, adjust for us. And if that happens, that's going to drive the cost of that workforce up. It was tough operating at times throughout the year. And I know Dr. Flannery's shaking her head over there. We had some tough times where we had staff that were out and we couldn't backfill them. And so I have that in there as a concern. The Beezer's rate may increase beyond prior year projections. And I talked about this before. If anybody was watching the news, you saw there was a problem with the PA state, the Beezer's fund. Did you see that? They overstated some earnings and it messed up. And now everybody has to pay a little extra. Every employee has to pay a little extra now, or some of them, at least some that are lucky don't have to. I'm not lucky. But that could come back to also hit employer rates as well. Right now it's affecting the employer rates, but it may come back and hit the employer rates. And if that happens, that's going to drive Beezer's cost up again year over year. And then state funding, it seems like broken record. Every year we talk about state funding. They can never seem to come to a budget and get it out there in time for us to approve our budget. So it's always a big question mark. We don't know if it's going to be flat funded again for the third year in a row, or we don't know whether they're going to put more money into it. I know the state's having revenue issues as well, so I'm not sure how much money they're going to be contributing more to the school districts. So they've had all kinds of talks about multi-year budgets and things like that, but it always seems that they don't figure anything out until July or August, and we have to have our budget done June 30th. So it's always a big question mark. So I've covered a lot and I see everybody's super excited. Any questions?
Not necessarily a question, but just see if I'm hearing this correctly. I mean, it's really to look at index for the next 2-3 years, see where the market goes, what we actually have come on roll of other properties within Manheim Central, and see where we're at that point in time to reevaluate tax increases or decreases in the future. Am I correct, Brad?
Yeah, I would say that, and I don't know if it's the next couple years, but it's at least this year. I think this year, after coming on the heels of a zero, it gets us a chance to meet that deficit value. If we start paying off that deficit with fund balance right away, I'm afraid we're not going to have the recurring revenue in place, and we're going to create a little bit of an emergency here, and talking about cutting things beyond what this community is comfortable with. So I would say at least for this year, while that index is there and we know what it's going to be, let's go ahead and do that. And I know it's a tough conversation. I know it's hard to roll that out as a school board and a school district. And ideally, we wouldn't want to have to do that. But I don't want to be in a position when that $1.5 million hits where we're chasing our tail and we will burn through that money very quickly. And so that's my major concern with that. So maybe not a couple years, but at least 1 year. And then we can take a look at what the economy is doing from an economic rebound and what that Act 1 index is going to be moving forward, what rates are going to do, what inflation is going to do. It gives us a little bit of time. There's just too many unknowns right now moving forward in the next year, in my estimation.
And on page 3, you show projected unassigned funds. Is there a limit to that?
There is. It's the unassigned fund balance is limited for us, our class of school district, at 8% of the following year's expenditures. Now, the way you can carry more than that, that's just the unassigned. We've assigned money for Peas or Spikes. We've assigned a committed money for capital projects in the future, and we've assigned money for future debt service. So the assigned balance does not count towards the 8%. But in that unassigned balance, if you'll recall, we have a motion tonight that says we have an intention of reclassifying some of our fund balance. We do that by the end of the fiscal year. But when the audit comes through and we find out where our final numbers are, then we can reassign and commit funds if we so choose.
Is that about 5,000?
I can't do anything without a calculator anymore. As far as how much it is.
I guess it's about the.
So if you got 15, if I take 59, 878, 535, which is our projected expenditures, times 0.08. So 4.8, we'd have to assign $750,000 of that, which is about the amount we got from some of the unexpected revenue. So we may want to put that towards future debt service, or we're knocking off bond issues in the future years.
Questions for Brian? Nice job, buddy.
Good job.
Good job, Mr. Howard.
21. I said 10, I'm sorry.
This concludes my report.
Okay, thank you very much. We're moving on to personnel. I need a motion. I'd like to put A through D together. Please take a look at A through D.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. I need a motion to put E through J together. E through J.
Second.
Any discussion?
We need to move it in a second.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. I'd also, before we move on, like to recognize some new employees that we have. I don't know who left and who didn't leave. I see a couple, if you're new, how that's standing. And introduce yourselves to the board, please.
Sure. My name is Gabrielle Donnell, and I'm one of the business education teachers at high school.
Welcome, Gabrielle.
Hi, I'm Tyler. I actually graduated from Manheim Central High School in 2018, and I'm on the agenda for the social studies position at the high school.
Well, welcome to Manheim Central, both of you. And do we have any support staff? And I'd like to welcome them aboard as well. Okay. So we voted on that. Let's put a motion up for K through M.
So moved. Second.
Any discussion? All those in
On item L,
item L, okay.
all those contracted staff for summer hours know they're limited to 20 days.
Yeah, they track that.
Contract.
They
You know that.
track that. We keep
I
track of
know
it.
I ask every year, but we did have a
No.
problem one year.
No. 1 year there was an issue. HR tracks that now pretty.
Happened in the court.
Any other discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Okay, treasurer's report. Mr. McGee.
I hope everybody, if they have any questions on the budget, financial statements, or the invoices, they got their questions answered. If not, Steve Ryan. I'll make a motion that we approve item A, the financial budget and statements for May 2021. Item B, approval of the monthly invoices for May 2021.
Any discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Hearing none, motion carries.
And a motion to approve the high school renovation invoices that we started to get.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Hearing none, motion carried. Anything else, Mr. McGann?
No.
Okay, thank you for your report. Next, we have business ops, Mr. Need.
So business ops, we had a meeting June 10th that covered a lot of ground. And coming out of it, we have a couple motions that I'm going to go through independently because they're all kind of different from each other. Some
Sure.
different topics. If they will.
Absolutely.
So the first one, all these, by the way, are endorsed and recommended by the Business Ops Committee. The first one is approval of the lease agreement with Mobile's Modular Space Incorporated to lease 2 additional double-wide modular classrooms, which would be 4 classrooms total, to be used during the Manheim Central High School renovation. Costs include the fixed amount of $341,500 plus 36 rental payments of $5,300.
Second.
Any discussion?
I have numerous questions. The first contract, modular base for the 10 units, their upfront costs are $381,500, and that was for 10 units. Why is for 4 additional units $341,500? Are they going to be on a different site? Are they going to be put up at a different time?
They are being put up at a different time and on a different site. And actually, the additional cost versus, so we initially had a quotation done where we had the extra 4 classrooms. In that, trying to go through and calculate space, we thought we could eliminate the 4 classroom units. And so we indicated that we weren't going to commit to the 4 units until we realized if we needed them or not. We in fact very much need them during this renovation. And so It's slightly more because the electrical system to run it has to be a separate electrical system than the one that's being run to.
And the 10 units are a 24-month lease and the last 4 are 36 months.
Yeah, we think we'd keep those 4 the longest. We went 24 in the 10 unit because some classrooms will open up, but we still feel we're going to need those 4 units there for the duration of the project. But we're hoping to be able to free ourselves of the 10 units sooner than the 4.
Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Hearing none, motion carries.
Next item is the approval of CSESI Incorporated proposal to install the new intercom system and the call system equipment for the high school renovation project for $497,578.92, which is on one of the CoStar's contracts 034-021.
Second.
Any discussion?
I have some questions.
Sure.
We just paid $79,000 in December for installing duplex and alarms. Are they going to reuse those?
They are being reused. They're actually going to be removed and stored
Okay.
as are other ones. So they were additionally needed at the time to fix failing ones.
I understand that.
Yeah, they are going to be reused. They're not. There's actually over 300 speakers in the high school. So
Are they going to run wiring for all these new wiring, or where does this? How can we go from $80,000?
it's I have a very detailed quotation on that. It is well that was for a small chunk of replacement blocks, and this is for all the speakers, all the copper wire and everything else, and it's extremely labor intensive.
Cheaper for them to run the wiring than the general.
It is, because through the construction contract, you're paying architectural fees on top of that, plus you're paying the additional prevailing wages and everything. And so doing some of this work,
Prevailing wage.
yeah, but doing some of this work outside of the contract saves us anywhere from 10 to 18% on the cost of it. Because
Be able to work in the contractor's schedule to do that work?
yeah, actually, CSCSI has been attending the construction meetings bi-weekly. So they're very much involved in the planning and the coordination with the other mechanical. They won't slow anything down. In fact, they're right in there exchanging information back and forth. This is actually saving us some money. It's done on a CoStar's contract, so the pricing's pre-bid through the state.
So the original contract didn't include this work at all?
No, this would have been Mr. Weitzel's texting me. But
In other words, the architects didn't include this in their bid papers.
No, that was not included in the bid. We broke this out. We did not put it in the bid specs. Kind of like the pole barn, we brought it out because we thought we could do it cheaper than what it could be done through the building project.
Any other questions? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed? Hearing none, motion carries.
Next item is approval of the agreement with QA Plus Incorporated to administer the quality assurance program of testing and inspection activities for the high school renovation. Our total cost of $481,280.
Discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Hearing none, motion carries.
And the last item, we're going to have a little bit of a modification to what's on the agenda, Linda.
Okay,
A request for approval of, the motion is approval of the proposal from Dolphin Electric to replace the lighting at Red 2 Stadium with LED stadium lights. The cost through Dolphin Electric would be $175,000 based on the CoStar's contract number 008-017. And the work would be completed prior to the fall sports season, or we're pending one more quote in this week that could be less. And it would be not to exceed the $175,000.
So you want the flexibility to choose?
Of the
Okay.
cheaper of the two.
I second the motion as stated.
Not to exceed
$175,000.
175,000.
That would be the maximum we would spend if the quote, they just didn't make our cutoff today, Linda.
Okay,
But the intent is to go for cheaper for the two proposals.
okay. And there was a second. Any discussion? Yes.
John, who would that second bid come from?
I don't know exactly who that's coming from, but I know that Alexis, our new facilities director, met with them last week, or met with them today, and they are gonna have a quote by Wednesday.
And they'll still be able to meet the timeline?
That's the requirement, Mike.
Okay,
Regardless
very
of
good.
vendor, it has to be completed prior to fall sports.
And Alexis just came to the rescue and messaged me MVE.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, that's the other vendor we discussed
The other
at the
vendor.
facilities committee meeting.
Any other discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries.
That concludes our report.
Okay, and you don't have a next meeting?
Not at this
scheduled
time.
yet. Okay, thank you. All right, academic committee report, Dr. Frick.
Nothing to report at this time. Next meeting is to be determined.
Okay, thank you. Activities, Mr. Claire.
Nothing to report at this time, and no meeting scheduled.
Question, a request for Mr. Claire.
Yes,
This might, I feel this should fall under your committee. You handled these kind of things very well in the past, but if the administration wants to do otherwise, I'm fine with that. I would ask that we get ahead of the transgender in sports situation and try and form a policy within the LL League or preferably within PIAA. I learned from the pandemic that when each school does their own thing, like for example, how they fill the gymnasium and who can sit at games and whether to wear a mask or not, it's very confusing. So I would ask that we try and work to align with either the LL League or the entire state on how to handle transgender athletes.
I'll refer that to Dr. Aiken. If the activity committee, I somehow don't believe the committee, that part should be done by the activity committee. I think that goes higher. PIA already has a policy on it. The District 3 already has a policy on it. I think we just have to adopt one of those.
I'll reach out to Stockton Leader for some guidance on how they would recommend.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rob.
Thank you. Mike.
Anything else, Mr. Claire?
No, that ends the report.
Hey, thank
I have
you.
something,
Oh, go
just
ahead.
on committees in general.
Yeah.
Because I couldn't attend the facilities committee meeting because I had another meeting. Would we be able to tape those so that people who don't get to the meetings for one reason or another can
You say tape them. You say tape them?
tape them or video them so that we can view them at a later date?
Yeah, I can work with John on that.
Know what's going on.
Absolutely.
That's a great suggestion, Pat.
Can I go back to the superintendent's report with two small questions? I forgot to ask him when we were doing it.
Go ahead.
I know it's a long day. Closing on Stegall Elementary. Is that something that's going to happen in the near future, or are we still going to look down the road a ways on that one?
Yeah, I'm going to weigh in because Brian just had a conversation with our solicitor on this. The wheels are still in motion. And really we are, the wheels are still in motion on it. They might be slow in motion, but they are in motion. Right.
Fine.
Yeah, the final, I'm working with the new solicitor, Stockton Leader. The final amendment we did was reference the pandemic emergency declaration, and that there would be so much so much time, 4 months specifically from the end of the declaration. So that was kind of left open to interpretation as to what's the end of the declaration. So we're still working it. We're working very closely with Stock and Leader, and we're trying to push this through. He has told me that he very much is still very interested in the project, and it's been tough for commercial real estate investors through that. But yeah, we're in a sales agreement, and we're complying with the terms of it at this point. So we're hoping in the next 3 to 4 months we get this resolved.
Okay. And the next step house, is that going to be ready for use in the fall?
We met today, Mr. McGee, and those bids for Next Step House came in much higher than we anticipated or liked. So we're working on some alternative plans right now. But we will have a Next Step program in place for the fall. And then right now we're working with some different.
Not in the house that we bought.
I don't believe that we're trying to beat feet on this, but I don't foresee that happening for the start of this school year. But those kids will have a place, and then we'll continue with the program. We'll make it as successful as it's been. But we have some behind the scenes work to try to get those renovations in place to make that building or that house operational.
I have a question on that also. If Next Step won't be ready for Next Step, we will not then be using that house at all during the year for anything else?
Well, our intent, Mr. Claire, is that we would get the recommended renovations in place as fast as possible. So
Okay.
it would not be operational while we got those renovations in place.
All right. I just want to make sure that we aren't moving the Next Step house back to the high school or a modular classroom because we want to use that house for something else.
No.
All right. Thank you. That was my main concern. Thank you.
Anything else, Pat?
No.
Okay, all right, let's move down to general action items. A, the approval to adopt the final budget of the Manheim Central School District for the 2021-2022 fiscal year in the amount of $59,878,537 to include a local property tax increase of 3% and a millage rate of 15.1011. I need a motion.
So moved. Second.
Discussion. I'd just like to say that I'm very proud of, as a board, that we have in the last 4 years done 2 zero tax increases and kept our index below or on the index that we have. So I'm very proud of that. No one wants to see a 3%, but I think it's necessary.
I want to thank Brian for all the preparation. I know budget prep is difficult. I feel we can do it with 1.5%. I would rather do that.
Any other discussion? Okay, do we need to do this as a
Do a roll call.
roll call? Go ahead.
Before we go roll call, we're voting on a 3%, correct?
Yes, sir.
Correct, that's the motion.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Mr. Claire,
Yes.
Dr. Frick,
Yes.
Mr. Bushy,
Yes.
Mr. Yazway,
No.
Mr. McGeehan,
No.
Mrs. Ritter,
No.
Mr. Need,
Yes.
Mr. Linder,
Yes.
Mrs. Williams.
Yes.
Motion passes 6-3.
Okay, I need a motion for the approval of the 2021 annual tax levy resolution, setting the millage rate at 3%.
So moved.
Second.
I don't have to,
Just add 15.
15.1101. Now I need the motion.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
No.
Okay. C, the approval of the 2021 Homestead and Farmstead Exclusion Resolution. I need a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. B, the approval of a 3% increase for support staff salaries for the 2021-2022 school year, effective July 1st, 2021, pending evaluations.
So move the motion.
I think Stacy seconded.
I did. I seconded it.
Okay, thanks, Stacy.
Yeah.
Any discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
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 All those opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. E, I need a motion for the approval of a one-time stipend equal to 1.5% of the current pay raise for support staff that have reached or exceeded the maximum of their respective pay raises for the 2021-2022 school year, effective July 1st, 2021, pending evaluations.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed? Motion carries. F, I need a motion for the approval of a 3% increase for district office administrators' salaries for the 2021-2022 school year, effective July 1st, 2021, pending evaluations.
So move.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Okay, if you take a look, I'd like to put G through M together.
So moved.
Any discussion?
On item J.
Okay,
We had 51 change orders for Barron Elementary, and only 3 of them were over $20,000. And the total change orders came to around 303,000, roughly 1%. So in the high school, if we have the same 1%, we're talking $500,000 or more. So I would like to see Jake was out of that motion and voted on separately.
you want to do it separately? Okay, so why don't we do this?
We have to rescind.
Yeah, we have to.
I rescind the motion.
Okay.
Seconded. Mr. Linder.
I'll rescind it.
Second.
Okay, so then let's put G through I together. Motion for G through I.
So moved.
Second.
Are those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Hearing none, motion's carried. Okay, I need a motion for the approval of J to authorize the superintendent to approve change order under $20,000 for the duration of the project and all change orders during the months of July and August 2021 for the high school renovation building project.
So moved.
Discussion.
Could we put would it be responsible to put a cap on it? You know, a total of X number of dollars?
Well, this motion has a cap of 20,000. That's why it just got moved. I think maybe let's put a sunset on it.
Yeah, I guess when we only had 3 change orders over $20,000. The last 2 buildings we did, they all came to us for a vote, and we had not much discussion on most of them. I mean, we only had
I'm thinking of Pat's example, 50 change orders of 20,000.
Well, the say, Rob, is either we can say, let's put a sunset on this 20,000 summer to get through the initial startup and then go back for a lower number perhaps.
Yeah, I'd like to do
See
some.
what a run rate looks like, some flexibility. Conversely, number and to start off with and see if it's too administratively burdensome to then open it up
We do
later.
have a July board meeting on August. This is just to make sure.
Not going to slow anything down for us to approve change order.
What do you guys recommend? Listen, I respect what Pat's bringing to the table, but I want to give them flexibility to do what they need to do.
So if I would respectfully just indicate, we did have this motion in place for Barron. The purpose of this, we can debate the amount, like you can lower the amount if you'd like to. The reason for this is suppose, like today we have this meeting and a request for information goes in, something needs modified, something needs changed, it's going to cost an additional $1,500 or it's going to save $2,000 or something like that. That would have to sit and any construction would have to halt at that because they wouldn't be able to start the work until board approves it. So that would be 30 full days until they could pick up whatever they were doing there. So the purpose of this authorization is to allow Dr. Aiken to approve. It's still going to come to the board for final approval on the amount. So we can, if you're not comfortable with the amount, we could certainly talk about the amount.
But in your scenario, by the time it comes to the board, the work's already done, and if we don't want to approve it, then what? And the discussion on the loading dock at the middle, at the Barron Elementary was a prime example.
I think we need to give Dr. Aiken the approval of the $20,000 so we can keep this project moving.
I can look it up.
I did look up. I don't think there was a number associated with it because we're obviously kicking this project off now. Where when we did Barron, we were right in the 11th hour on that. It was no dollar amount
We're
on
gonna
that.
have a lot more change orders with a renovation than we ever had with a reconstruction. So I think that 1%, you can throw that out the window. We'll probably be at $1 million of change by the time we're done.
I think Mr. Reed has some merit there, and I think admittedly not as the motion's made right now, but I think just to see what our run rate looks like, to put a sunset on it for the end of September, to see how we do in our first 3 months of the demo reno, because we're in the demo phase now. Right, would give us a feel for what it looks like, and then revisit this at the September board meeting, right, to reset where we think we don't be. This is latitude, so we're not losing ground early on. But it'd be my suggestion.
Amend the motion.
Well, yeah.
Well, you'd have to amend, you'd either have to amend or rescind the original move or amend the motion. And then, so Mr. Clare made the motion, Mr. Yazway seconded. So Mr. Clare would have to amend the motion. Mr. Yazway would have to.
Mr. Neal, on the facilities committee, who else is with you besides, can you refresh my memory? Who else? Is it you and do you have a co-person on there with you?
We don't this year. We adventures and
Well,
I haven't been there every time.
So I guess then maybe what I would say is, could we keep this and then those change orders that come in from a facilities committee representative, we'll call and have a conference call with a small committee of the board and have that discussion, because I hear what you're saying, Mr. McGee, about the loading dock, and we don't ever want to operate in isolation. I don't know, I went to full support of the board. So would that be a concession that we can make, is to say, hey, as these change orders come in, we'll set up a conference call with Mr. Need, Mr. Lender, and say, hey, here's what's coming down the pike. And I think with the four of us talking and our construction people, say, hey, we should push pause on this to bring it back to the full board in July, or hey, this is part of the project that needs to go forward. Would that be suitable?
I would,
Good.
to me, that sounds.
We're gonna have to unwind the first motion and then
Motion, yeah.
Yeah, you
remove,
have to change it all.
Okay,
maybe just rescind it and then.
I'll rescind it. My motion.
okay. Okay, we need a new motion. And it would be for the approval to authorize the superintendent along with two facilities committee members to approve orders under $20,000 for the duration of the project and all change orders during the months of July and August 2021 for the high school renovation building project.
So moved.
Discussion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? None, motion carries. Okay. Now let's move on to, I need a motion to put K through N together.
Second?
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Okay, N. I need a motion for the approval of the commercial package workers' compensation, student supplemental accidental policy, and interscholastic sport accident insurance policy renewals as proposed by Caris, is it Caris? The insurance group.
So moved.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries. Oh, I need an approval of a new 60-month lease agreements for Casera multi-function copiers from Marco to replace the expiring lease at a cost of $6,186.50 per month.
So moved. Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. P, I need a motion for the approval of the renewal membership with PSBA for the 2021-2022 school year in the amount of $16,579.80, no cost increase from 2020-2021.
So moved.
So second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. I need a motion. I'd like to put Q through AA together. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Hearing none, motion carries. Okay, we're on B now, folks. I need a motion for the approval of 2021-2022 student handbook.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion?
This reviewed in academic ed. That go through academic.
Handbook, yeah.
Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. C, I need a motion for the approval of the MOU with the Manheim Borough Police Department through June 30th, 2023.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All All those opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Double D, the approval of tuition waiver requests for learners to complete the 2020-2021 school year.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. Double E, approval of district volunteers for the 2021-2022 school year.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? None, motion carried. Okay, we are down to board representatives reports. Lancaster, Lebanon, IU 13, Mrs. Ritter.
Unfortunately, I was not able to attend the meeting that we just had, so I don't have anything to report at the moment.
Well, if you get anything, just send it on to us through email if you want.
Yeah, I'll send it to the district. I'm sorry, to the board email. I apologize. I'm trying to read the thing and follow you at the same time. Yes.
Okay, I think that's a good idea. If you have something, you can let us know. How's that?
Wonderful. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Lancaster County CTC, Mr. Bushy.
We have a meeting coming up on Thursday. Other than that, I have nothing to report.
Okay, thank you. PSBA Legislative, Mr. Claire.
Basically, keep reading those memos. The bills before the House are, some are getting thrown out, some are still on line to be voted on. And if we all don't keep on it, they're going to try to squeeze something through that we're going to be sorry for. We all get the emails every day, so just look over them, please. That ends my report.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Claire. I do want to note that, we've talked about PSBA several times about how expensive it is for us to the member there, but I think during this pandemic time, the last 2 years, we've gotten some really important information coming to us on a daily basis, which
We have.
I truly appreciate. So, okay, Lancaster County Academy, Mr.
Okay.
Oh, we have to. Oh, okay. Oh, I'm sorry. We need a motion for the approval to appoint Mr. Claire as the Manheim Central School District voting delegate for the PSBA Delegate Assembly.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? You can't chime in, Mr. Claire. Any discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Congratulations, Mr. Claire. Okay, Mr. Claire, Lancaster County Academy.
All right. I'm on the agenda for approval of the budget.
It shows,
Pardon me?
it has you doing that.
Okay, very good. I don't have the copy of that, the minutes in front of me. So I tell you what, Lancaster County Academy was just about ready to close its doors and run away because we were all we thought of is the mall store. Well, the last gentleman we hired to run the place has done an outstanding job. And in fact, we are now going to open up another building, which Manheim Central will go to in Mount Joy, which will be more convenient. Just real quick, if you look at the actual revenue received in 14-15 was 377,000, and the budget coming in is for 410,000. And yet the expenses have gone down over the time. We're looking at the fund balance back in 14-15 was 21.3%. And this past year, it's going to be 53.9%. And that only represents 218,000. That fund balance will be used in the future to add to the curriculum of the academy. So I would ask for I'll make a motion for approval of the Lancaster County Academy budget for 2021, 2022.
Second.
Any discussion?
The only discussion I have, and I excuse for that, our increase per slot will be going up just $200.
I think it's a great program and I appreciate all the time you put into it, Mr. Claire.
Thank you.
Any other discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
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 All those opposed? Hearing none, motion carried.
That would end my report.
Good, okay. Our next regularly scheduled board meeting will be held on July 26th, 2021 at the Manheim Central District Office at 7 p.m. Anybody have anything for the common good they'd like to say? Board members.
The only thing I'd like to say, Mrs. Williams, is this is amazing. It's what, 9:18, and we've gone through a meeting like this. I remember meetings similar to this that would go till 12, 1 o'clock in the morning. So I compliment everybody for the meeting.
We remind you, we aren't finished yet, Mr. Claire.
Oh, we're not. What?
Have an exec session after this.
Oh, well, that's,
I'm just saying board. I got you. Okay, anybody else have something? Okay. Let's see, I told you when our next meeting is, then I just need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, hearing none, motion carries and we adjourn.
now what do we go back in?